What can you explain to us who aren't Māori as what we need to know about the Māori way of doing things? And let me just preface that with one thing. Sorry, I know I'm a terrible because I asked 7 questions at the same time. My position is this. I always say, even though I'm of Irish ancestry, Irish and probably English, but my kind of thinking about my dad's as being New Zealand because they were here since like the 1860s or something. But, Irish and Kiwi, half Irish, half Kiwi sort of thing. I still consider for me the Māori story to be a part of my story. It's not part of my blood, but it's part of my story. Because if this is my country and I'm part of this country and I'm part of this land, then the Māori story is my story as well. Although I'm not ethnically or bloodline attached to the Māori story. So that's how I've always kind of got through life, thinking about how important the Māori story is to me. But it's not, it's not a whakapapa, it's not a bloodline to me. So for those of us who aren't in there, what do we need to know when we hear things like a very Māori way of doing things? What do we need to understand what that means?
Oh, I love that. What a juicy question.
Thanks.
And I think, and it's really, what a nice characterization of how you feel as well about your identity, because this is the thing that I love the most, and what I write about the most is like, what's the future for us as a bicultural nation, and what does it look like as a place for everyone? Because I think, you need to leave space for everyone in the story, that while we're asserting our tino rangatiratanga, we're also providing places for other people to have a role. And that's, some people talk about being kangata tiriti, like that's your kind of identity in that treaty relationship. But it's interesting you talk about the Celtic stuff. So on mum's side, we're English and Irish and Scottish. So we've got that whole mix. And the similarity between some of the rituals, especially around death. So very similar in terms of the Irish side. We have the body at home that people come and visit, and you have it for a couple of days, and then you have a big party at the end. That's not dissimilar to a tangi. And yeah, I love those points of connection, but then also I love celebrating the differences, because it's just more interesting. Like, what really fucks me off is, this is a wild tangent, but when politicians and Māori politicians are anti-immigrant, because I love the richness of all the stories that we have in New Zealand, and it makes us so much more interesting as a people. And I'm thinking about New Zealand First here specifically. It's no secret that I'm pleased that they didn't get back in, because that sort of ugly, boring perspective of who we are is not the one. And it's not Māori, so that our values, our core values, so manaakitanga, looking after people, that should be extended to everyone who comes into our country. But how to characterise the Māori way of doing things? So reciprocity is a big one. So and the knowledge that you impact more than just yourself with everything that you do. And I take that into everything really with me, as that's kind of what I see as a core principle. And that's like, I mentioned research as an example. So for a long time, Pākehā researchers would do research on Māori and go in and, have a look at us, and then from the outside, and then try and analyse what they found without having any real understanding of us and our story. And so now as researchers, you have to engage at the beginning. You have to understand what whānau want from that research. They have to kind of agree, have informed consent, and then you bring it back and you gift the knowledge back, and hopefully do something positive and tangible for the community. Now, that's a perfect picture of what research should look like, and it doesn't always happen that way. But that's kind of that. I think that gives you a picture that we're all connected, and just acknowledging all those points of connection. But the best example probably is, I took Noelle McCarthy into quite a scary situation for her. So we went to meet Māori psychiatrist Dai Kopua, who has this model of mental health that is doing really well for Māori. We went to Gisborne, and it was like an impromptu pōwhiri. So everyone was there. You walk in the door, it's quite intimidating. You don't know what to do. You haven't had this kind of experience before. And Noelle was shitting herself. And I just sort of whispered to her, just say, where you're from and the fact that you have a daughter. And she said that, and everyone sort of smiled and got it. It's just that always connecting in with the relationships between us. And so, your little mihi at the top there about where you're from, that's how we roll, Yeah,
it's interesting. I like the connection between the Māori and Celtic way of doing things. And I've never made this connection before, as you've just said it, but as you were saying it, my mum passed 2 and a bit years ago, just over a couple of years ago, and I sort of said this thing tongue in cheek, obviously, is that I was in the hospital when she passed. She had motor neuron disease, so it wasn't so she was at the hospital at the end. And my sisters all wanted to, kind of move. They were a bit freaked out that there might be a body bag turning up and they couldn't see their mum do that sort of thing. But I had this sense, this kind of deep, innate sense that I couldn't leave the body. And the way I joke is it's the Maori in me coming out. But the way you've just kind of portrayed it, that there are similarities, maybe that was the Irish in me coming out, actually, because it was that item that I just didn't want. I didn't feel like she could be left alone. And actually, one of my, it sounds weird to say highlights, but what's a nicer way of saying that in highlights? More memorable times of that sort of week was the 90 minutes that I was in that room by myself with my mum after she had passed and before the funeral director turned up. I was in the lazy boy, and I was just chilling, had a little nap, and that's sort of what I did. And it was definitely a highlight of
a shit time.
Of a shit time, yeah. So it's
and I think those are human things too. Like, so I mean, I'm not a religious person, but we you connect in with those kind of deeper, more spiritual values, and I think our culture has, our tikanga has structures around how you do that stuff, and so stay with the body. There's a time during tangihanga where you air your grievances, you say the good stuff, you get it all off your chest, but that ends, and so there's kind of closure. There's an opportunity, and everyone can do it, but then it's over, and then you return to the world of light. So it just kind of formalizes all that stuff that's actually just deeply human.